Hey guys, welcome back. So let's talk about aperture today. In its simplest form, an aperture is literally just a hole in a lens that allows light to go through it and hit the sensor in a camera body. The aperture in a lens is always adjusted using something called f-stops. F-stops typically start around 1.2 and go all the way up to around f30 or f40 even. So as an example, if you have a lens that opens up to 1.4 as an aperture setting, this means that it's opening up very wide and has a huge amount of light going through the lens and hitting the camera sensor. On the other hand, if you have a lens that opens up only to 3.5 or so, that means that there's less light going through the actual lens and hitting the camera sensor. If you are currently using an entry-level SLR camera, most likely it came with what's called a kit lens. Kit lenses are inexpensive lenses that typically don't open up very wide when it comes to their aperture. As an example, this is one of my kit lenses, and at the very most, this can open up to a 3.5 f-stop. On the other hand, if you spend more money on a professional lens like this one, you will be able to see that it opens up much wider, in this case 1.8. With this being a 1.8 f-stop lens, you can see that it will let in lots of light into the sensor of the camera. But one thing to keep in mind is that the wider the f-stops go on a lens, the more expensive it typically is because it's letting in more light, which requires a lot more glass in the lens. There are two very specific reasons why you would want to change the aperture setting on a camera. The first reason, which I already mentioned, is to allow more light to go through the lens and hit the sensor in the camera. The second reason is a much more stylistic choice. The easiest way to remember it is that the more open an aperture setting is on a lens, the more blurred out the background will be behind you or your subject. And on the opposite side of things, if you close down your aperture to a very high number, say f20 or f30, the majority of your scene or your subject will be in focus. The depth of field is a fancy term to describe how much of a photo is actually in focus. As a quick example, I'm using an f2.8 lens behind the camera here for my video. For this set of videos, I'm using this lens at its maximum f2.8 so that I can be separated from the background by having the background out of focus. On the other hand, you may require a really high f-stop number for something such as product photography. As an example, if I wanted to take a photo of this old film camera with a very shallow depth of field, if I focused on this area here and it was on an angle, you would actually have the back of the camera blurred out, which for product photography, a lot of the time you do not want that. You want the whole photo in focus. One last thing to keep in mind, with a few exceptions, the majority of lenses out there are actually sharpest right around the middle of their f-stop settings. If the lens that you are using is a kit lens, for example, if it goes from f3.5 down to f20 or so, it may be a good idea to start shooting at around f8 as a starting point for your photo shoots, because that will be when your lens is typically sharpest, and then you can go from there. If you take away just one thing from this video, please remember that a small f-stop number will actually let in more light into your camera. A lot of people get this mixed up and reverse it. So a f1.2, for example, will let in lots of light, where an f30 setting on a lens will let in just a tiny bit of light to hit your camera sensor. Well, that's it for today for me, so if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel for more content. Thanks!